This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Welcome, everyone, to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagel, the CEO of Metal Blade Records, where bands like Slayer, Metallica, Killswitch Engage, Fate's Warning, Armored Saint, and many, many others have thrived over the years. If you guys are looking for really cool merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, the whole thing, from music, sports, entertainment, really almost anything, you guys have to go check out our friends at Old Glory. Go to oldglory.com and enter the code METAL1982. Again, that's METAL1982, and they're going to give you 15% off of your order. So go check them out. They have great stuff, lots of metal gear. Go to oldglory.com. This episode, we're going to talk about the amazing Van Halen song, Ain't Talkin Bout Love. Really great, amazing track. We're going to get into it. As always, we're going to talk to production, and we're going to talk to our friend Mark Lewis about that. Then we're going to talk to the great guitar player, Rob Caggiano. You know him from Anthrax and Volbeat. But first, we're going to go up to Canada, and Martin Popoff is going to give us some information about this great song.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. What an amazing song. Ain't Talkin Bout Love, Van Halen, from the album So Good They Had to Name It Twice. Van Halen, right? This is the fourth single from the debut album. This came out September of 1978. The album itself came out February 10th, 1978, which is the same day as Judas Priest's Stained Class. How's that for coolness? That's another amazing barnstormer of an album. It's funny. Eddie wrote this song, and he said that it was written sort of as a response to punk. Maybe something like a Queen Sheer Heart Attack. Eddie used to call it a 2-chord song, but obviously in its final conglomeration, it does not sound anything like a punk song. You can hear the 2-chordness, I suppose, of it, but he's added that incredible lick, which is such a great, almost European heavy metal lick. The other thing that bothers me about this song, or one of the things that bothers me, is this. It's really hard to write out, right? You've got the ain't, you've got a talking with apostrophe, you've got an apostrophe bout, and then it's like, oh, do we have a big B on the bout, or is it a small b? Love. And it's just one of these songs with a title that's a bunch of kind of like dull words put together, and it doesn't sound like a heavy song, but it absolutely turns out to be a totally heavy song in this. So yeah, it's got that incredible Eddie riff. What a great performance from everybody. Incredible Ted Templeman production on this album. I always say that this album has this is the most professional album the band ever put together. It's the most locked down, most conservative production, and then the band becomes The Who, because after this is where you really start getting that Van Halen chemistry, that Van Halen Brown sound, which I define, most people define it as what's coming from Eddie's fingers, his style of playing, his approach to amplification, the idea of not putting a rhythm track behind, a guitar solo and keeping it live and explosive. All these things add up to the Brown sound, but I think Alex Van Halen is a big part of the Brown sound as well. But you don't get the Brown sound on this album. This album, like I say, is the most professional they would ever be. I remember when this album came out, Not being such a big fan of some of the songs in there, like Feel Your Love Tonight and Ice Cream Man and Little Dreamer, and then not even being that big a fan. We do get a Kinks cover on here, but even Jamie's Crying and Run with the Devil, I remember it clear as day playing this for the very first time, thinking that, yeah, they're okay songs. They're okay hard rocking songs. We love the production immediately, but what made this album so incredible was the presence of Ain't Talkin' About Love and Atomic Punk and I'm the One and On Fire, right? And these were the only songs that made us think at the time, this is almost as cool as a European metal band. This is almost as cool as those early Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Your Eye Heap, super heavy songs, or more recently, things from the Scorpions on Virgin Killer and Taken by Force, or a better band than Van Halen, really, already by this point, or at this point, like I say, coming out the same day, Judas Priest with Stained Class, but before this, Sin After Sin, Sad Wings of Destiny. So, the heavy metal on this album, it's almost like a Queen situation. When they did heavy metal, which is rare, but when they made heavy metal, it was as good or better than everybody else's heavy metal. That's the way this album felt. And this song in particular, this song, among the heavy metal songs, among the European sounding heavy metal songs, wasn't a wall of sound like the other ones were, but it just had that incredible, sinewy, mysterious, cool riff to it. And the licks that are put in by Eddie all over the place are incredible as well. And David does a great job singing. I mean, we know over the years we've heard all the stuff about how hard it was getting a great performance out of Dave, but testimony to Ted Templeman, he did get it. He would even send the other guys home so they wouldn't be upset about how hard it was to get a performance out of Dave. Case in point, or testimony to Ted's incredible skill. We never felt that Dave wasn't a great singer from these records that we were getting, right? And especially the Van Halen album. He sounded like a leader of this band, actually. And this was just a beautifully well put together heavy metal song. So yeah, great choice, Brian. Ain't Talking About Love.
Thanks.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
As always, Martin. I wasn't aware that this was kind of a response to punk. That was really interesting. He always comes up with all sorts of interesting little tidbits on these songs, which is why we love having him here. And we're back again with producer extraordinaire, man of many, many talents, Mr. Mark Lewis. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
So I feel kind of bad that, whenever you're on, we're usually talking about some super heavy stuff because that's usually what you do. And that's what we do. But now we're going in a little bit of a different direction, which I think would be a lot of fun. We're talking about classic Van Halen track, Ain't Talking About Love. And I mean, what can you say about Eddie Van Halen and his sound?
Look, when it comes to Eddie, and I say the same thing, you have Tony Iommi and you have Eddie, and they are the most important instrumentalists, in my opinion, in pop music from 1969 until now. And people will say, oh, what about the Beatles, blah, blah. It's not about how the Beatles played their instruments. It's about how they wrote the songs. But when you have Eddie and you have Tony, they revolutionized the way the guitar was played. And they also revolutionized songwriting and arrangements. And I know that Eddie and Tony were great friends and had big mutual respect, but it's something that I cannot say enough of. I mean, I truly believe that Eddie was pretty much, if not one of the single most influential instrumentalists of many generations. And, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Collective Soul or Cannibal Corpse, they're all influenced deeply by Eddie and probably all love and worship him. I mean, he's like the Les Paul of heavy metal. He revolutionized the instrument, but was also an inventor and, just so incredibly interesting with his visions for the instrument and amplification and recording and pushing his own band to do different things. And just, I mean, God, I mean, how long do we have? I could talk about this for 3 hours,
Right. Yeah. I think Well, people will probably argue, well, Van Halen's not really a heavy metal band. It's like, I mean, they're on the cusp of it, but clearly influenced every
Mhm.
single guitar player that ever played, no matter what genre, and certainly in heavy metal.
Right.
And I think this song in particular is probably one of the heavier Van Halen songs. What I find really, it's, one of their classic hits, obviously, but when it came out in 1977, these riffs that he's writing, I
Mhm.
mean, those are, you mentioned Tony Iommi, these are like Black Sabbath-y, super, super heavy riffs
Yeah.
in kind of an overall pop-ish song.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not listening to it as we, talk about this, but just playing the riff in my head on the guitar, like that's actually a major chord he's doing on that dun 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 dun. Like that's a major chord, but he takes it and makes it dark. And then especially when they get into the chorus, he really gets into this darker territory. And the notes that Dave is singing, it's like this incredibly catchy pop type song, but it's pretty dark note choice. It's certainly not like a happy melody. And it so perfectly matches the lyrics. And like this whole brilliant juxtaposition of the notes and the lyrics and how it all plays together is just, it's so beyond brilliant, man. I mean, without even talking about the sonics of that record, it's just so cool.
The one thing that struck me, and this is just overall Van Halen, especially the early stuff. So he's obviously, looked at as this incredible shredding lead player, etc. But when you look at a song like this, he's not shredding. There's no shredding leads here. He's playing a really super heavy rhythm, and then some cool backing sort of little tweaks here and there. But there's not like a shredding solo at all in the song. But you don't really, you forget that he wrote so many of these great super heavy songs, and not all of it was just him shredding. Like, as a songwriter, I don't know that he gets as much credit as he probably should.
Well, I mean, all those guys are like that. I mean, whether, you could start with Les Paul or Chuck Berry and then to Hendrix when it really became about the guitar gods. And then you go from Hendrix, if we're going to go to the really big guys, you go from Hendrix to Van Halen, and the same thing with Stevie Ray Vaughan or Dimebag. Their rhythm playing is as good or better than their lead playing, and it's so like the pocket is so crazy and so hard to mimic. Like, I remember being a young guitar player, and it might sound crazy to somebody, but it was easier for me to mimic a John Petrucci solo than it was for me to cop Van Halen riffs. And it's because Eddie's feel is so just humanized, and so he's so in the pocket. He really does swing. He fucking knows jazz. He fucking knows old rock and roll. He knows classical, and him and Alex really do swing. It's not just like this word to make it sound more interesting. It's like they are swinging, or they're doing a shuffle, or they're doing things that are just, weren't really happening in music that was that quote unquote extreme, I guess. And I guess, long story long, the rhythm playing of these guys is so vital and so hard to cop. I mean, if you want to get into playing, Hot for Teacher, or, and I'm talking about the verse riff, not the tapping intro, or there's so many Van Halen, riffs. And then you look at something like Little Wing, by Hendrix. It's so hard to cop these rhythms, and it's such an important thing of these players, and people focus on their leads, but they just don't realize how incredible these guys were as accompanists to the band and just rhythm players. It's just critical. It's crazy what they accomplished.
Yeah, and ultimately, when you break it down, heavy metal as a genre, and you could include a million different bands in there, is all about the riffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what separates every band. That's what makes a band great. It's all about the riffs, whether it's Black Sabbath or Metallica or Van Halen.
Yeah.
It's all the riffs. And these guys would come up with these incredible riffs that's really where all the songs come from. And, the lead playing and whatever else is there, but
Yeah.
it really comes down to the riff.
Yeah, oh, it absolutely does. It's all about the riff, and it's all about how these guys felt. You can't make "Ain't Talking About Love" into a computer into MIDI, and have it sound. I mean, maybe somebody would recognize it, but it just doesn't work. I mean, the way those guys had their swing, and the way that Alex pushed and pulled the beat with Eddie, and I know that him and Eddie and Mike Anthony tracked that live in the studio. I mean, I've gone deep dives on this. I'm like, who the fuck is Don Landy and who the fuck is Ted Templeman? Because this is insane, and it still is, and the fact that both of those guys are still alive to tell the stories. I read the Ted Templeman book because I just had to know. I had to get the details on those recording sessions, and it's so interesting to hear their perspective, and especially Ted's perspective on what was going down. But I mean, they were just on fire, and it's so cool to hear that. But what Ted and Don captured sonically, I mean, it's funny to hear Van Halen talk about not being totally happy with some of those recordings, and I think all of us as fans are like, are you nuts? They're so amazing.
Yeah, I get the feeling that especially he was a perfectionist, and I could kind of understand that. When we were at Warner Brothers in the early 90s, Ted Templeman had an office at Warner Brothers. He wasn't in it very often, but every once in a while he'd be in there, and I was able to be introduced. I got introduced to everybody when we were there. So him being a rock guy, I was able to pick his brain here and there, and it's a really fascinating guy, and obviously, hugely intelligent and smart. And like the Van Halen recordings, I wasn't a huge fan of the panning on some of the stuff where it's just everything on one side and then Eddie on the other. I mean, I get why they did it, but what I did, and thankfully it's not that much on this song particularly, but I do love the crispness of the recordings. Like everything is really clear. Everything sounds really good. It doesn't sound muddy at all, but it also doesn't sound too tinny. It's kind of in that perfect little sweet spot where it's just really, really clear. And I think that helped kind of move these songs along, was the production was so crisp and clear.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, all those records that Don was involved in really had that high end, and that's something I still strive for in my recordings, because I feel like so many guys are just so dark and stuffy these days, and I'm like, why is it like this? Is everybody afraid of EQ? It is harder to get a mix really crisp and have it not be harsh than it is to just kind of let it be some dark thing. But I would love to pick Don Landy's brain about it, because it's so perfectly crisp. I wonder if I think that Don mastered a lot of these records. I got to go back and look, but I wonder how much high end Don was adding, before, when he was mastering, and how much of it is the mix. Cause it's so brilliantly done. I mean, you're absolutely right. The crispness of it is it's jarring when Eddie's guitar comes on, it's like something like You Really Got Me, or, Ain't Talking About Love. And you're just like, God damn, it's just so searing, but, it doesn't hurt your ears at the same time. And it's an accomplishment, and it's a big achievement, man.
Yeah. And the one thing too, to stress, is that anytime there's a 3-piece, you've got to have a really good bass player.
Yeah.
No matter how great the guitar player is, you got to have a really good bass player. I mean, look at Geezer Butler and Black Sabbath.
Oh, yeah.
To me, one of the best bass players of all time. And Michael Anthony doesn't get enough credit, I think. I mean, vocally, he clearly had a lot to do with the vocals, and that was really important. But I don't know if he gets enough credit. He's a really solid bass player. And again, I don't play anything, so I'm just have a remedial thought process of this stuff. But I don't think it's easy for a bass player to play behind a guitar player that's as dominant as Tony Iommi or Eddie Van Halen. And what he's doing in a lot of these songs, specifically here, really helps drive that song and almost makes Eddie's playing better, and certainly makes it heavier, I think.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, like I said, that rhythm section, Alex and Michael Anthony is one of the best ever. It's just incredible that they were that well rehearsed and knew how to play off each other that well. I don't think that it took them a million takes to get these songs down. I know that Ted and Don had a lot to do with getting the right ones, but they were obviously so well rehearsed, and Michael's playing is simple but super effective and right in the pocket. You never listen to Van Halen and go, that felt a little wonky. It's always like, man, they just nail it. And like I can listen back into the '90s, and some of the '80s where I'm like, that drummer was not nailing it, or like the ride part feels a little off, or the hi hats are ahead, or whatever. And it's not like that with Van Halen. It's so special rhythmically. And yeah, Michael Anthony was a big part of that, and the vocals too. The whole thing. It's just, God, what a perfect storm of awesomeness that band is.
Yeah, it's a whole package deal. It all has to work together for sure, and it absolutely does. And it's another classic track. And once again, my friend, thank you for coming on and talking about this. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. Very cool stuff.
Every sip of Coca-Cola brings you closer to the excitement of the FIFA World Cup 26. Because nothing compares to the joy. So grab a Coke and drink in the FIFA World Cup 26. No purchase necessary. 13 plus in 50 U.S. states and D.C. with a web-enabled device. Ends March 1st with 8 entry periods. Rules at cokeurl.com/soccer rules.
And now we welcome in guitar player extraordinaire. You know him from his work in Volbeat, Anthrax, and he also produced and co-wrote the great Jim Brewer rock and metal album, Songs from the Garage. My good friend, Mr. Rob Caggiano. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing pretty good, man.
So you came up with this song. It was on my list at some point, but it's probably the least, I guess, one of the more rockish songs, but clearly it fits absolutely in the context of the podcast, 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal, because it's Van Halen, and Eddie Van Halen, obviously, along with Tony Iommi and a couple other guys, probably the most influential guitar players ever.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah, 100%.
So what made you choose Van Halen?
Well, I mean, for me, he's my biggest influence on the guitar. This whole album, I mean, it's kind of hard to pick. For me, it's hard to pick a Van Halen song, especially from this record, because every single track is phenomenal. This thing came out in 1978. I was 4 years old in 1978, so I didn't get it in 1978. I got it, obviously, a few years later. I was probably around 8 years old when I heard this record, and it just blew me away at that age, like completely. I didn't even know what I was listening to. It was just mind-blowing. I grew up in a household. My dad's a really big hardcore music fan, like a lot of the old school stuff, like the doo-wop stuff, Dion and the Belmonts, like all that stuff. So, as a kid, that's really all I knew as far as music went. And then I got this record and AC/DC Back in Black at the same time. Actually, there was a flea market in the Yonkers Raceway, and I got both of those records on vinyl, and that was it. Just completely put me on this path.
The dark path.
Yeah.
Yeah, I chose this song because I think it's one of the heavier riffs that they did. And, the whole riff is so heavy. And if you ask me, when this record came out, this was super heavy. Like, you can argue it was just as heavy as Black Sabbath or Judas Priest in terms of the music. Obviously, Roth's a little more poppy, more catchy vocals. But if you just take away the vocals and listen to the guitar tones and the riffs, the riffs are just incredible.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what resonated with people. Obviously, the playing is over the top. It's unbelievable. It's like otherworldly, but the tones and the energy of this record, I mean, it just sounds like the band is playing live. I mean, they actually are playing live. That's why it sounds like that.
Yeah.
But the tones they got, it's just it's a total game changer. It changed everyone's perspective on the guitar and how you approach getting your sound and how you approach playing. It just changed the game across the board.
Yeah, 100%. And there's not one single guitar player in any heavy metal band that wasn't massively influenced by Eddie Van Halen or is a huge fan. One thing that we were talking about the production of it with my buddy Mark Lewis. And one thing that we talked about that I noticed too when listening to the song again Like there's no shredding lead. It's just super heavy riffs and then those really sweet little kind of guitar harmony stuff. And as I went back and started listening to more of the early Van Halen stuff, I kind of realized like as much of a shredder as Eddie is and was, like some of the early stuff, it wasn't that way. And it was more about the riff and the little other parts. And I think that's kind of what people lose a bit with him. Like he was a master riff maker.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just touched on something really important as far as the world of Eddie Van Halen. He's obviously the ultimate guitar god, the ultimate shredder. One thing that I always got from him as a hardcore fan is he's so musical, and everything he does, even if it's a shreddy bit, it's for the song and it fits perfectly in the song. This particular song, I think, would be weird if there was a shreddy solo. I think what he did, like he plays, like you said, that melodic part's like a theme, I guess, that happens in the middle of the song. It also comes back at the end of the song on the outro. The way I look at that is it's almost like a counterpoint to what the vocal melody is in the chorus, and that it's so musical. It's so perfect for the song.
Yeah, and I was a bit young when they were playing around LA. I'd heard about them and knew that they existed, but I was like, 16, 17, so I wasn't able to really go to any of those clubs or bars or backstage parties or whatever they were doing, which is a bummer. But then the record came out and, I was just blown away. I was like, forget the guitar. I'm not a guitar player. I can't play any instrument at all. But it was the songs and the songwriting and the riffs and how, back when that came out, this is a heavy record. You listen to it now and it's like, oh, it's not that heavy anymore because we've got all these crazy heavy things. But when that came out, that was a game changer. I remember listening to it going like, oh my God, what, just as a player, he was different, obviously, but just the riffs and the tones and the structure of the songs were really unique. And it was kind of obviously influenced by what was happening in Europe, but I'm sure, I know he was a fan of all that sort of stuff, but it just had a different, almost, I hate to say Southern California feel to it, but it kind of had a different flow of it, but still super heavy. Great.
Yeah, everything about what he did was innovative. And again, like I said, he changed the game across the board. Even like the actual guitar he was playing, I guess we would refer to that as like a super strat or whatever, but that kind of thing didn't really exist before him with the Floyd Rose and the whole thing. He wasn't using the Floyd Rose on this record, but just everything about the way he approached the instrument was completely unique.
Yeah, as a guitar player, like when you hear somebody like that, what does it do to you as a player? Like, I know sometimes people hear somebody really great, they go, oh, forget it, I can never be that good, I give up. Or does it kind of get you to want to play better or something?
It just makes me want to play. One of the other things I always got from listening to Eddie and the band in general, it just always sounded like they're having so much fun playing. It doesn't sound like a guy that's just sitting in a chair in a studio playing. It sounds like he's literally putting everything he has into the instrument, and he's got a smile on his face the entire time. And he always had a smile on his face. I challenge you to find a picture of Eddie Van Halen where he's not smiling.
There's not a lot.
Yeah, there's really not a lot, especially if he has the guitar in his hand. He's always smiling. That's an important thing.
Yeah, and we also, obviously, Van Halen gets all the credit and as he should, but we're talking earlier with Mark Lewis about how important and how great a player Michael Anthony is as a bass player, because you got to play a certain way when you've got a dominant guitar player like that. I made the example of Geezer Butler with Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath. Geezer's an unbelievable player, and he's playing really interesting parts aside from what Iommi's doing. And I thought that Michael Anthony did that pretty much the same way in Van Halen.
Yeah, he's definitely a very integral part of the band, especially on those early records, and the sound, even his background vocals, it's a huge part of the sound. And his playing is phenomenal. I just actually saw Sammy on this recent tour, Sammy and Michael Anthony and Joe Satriani on guitar, who I jokingly said, I made a post about it, he's got the hardest job in rock and roll playing those songs. But we had front row right in front of Michael Anthony, and I'd seen him before, obviously a few times, but I guess never really like up close like that front row. And it was amazing. He's such a beast of a bass player, and just everything about him. But yeah, you're totally right. His whole his sound and the way his bass lines and the whole thing. It's very integral to those early Van Halen records. It really is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times that gets overlooked. And again, I'm just looking at it from as a fan's point of view, but I always thought it's got to be really hard to be able to play underneath the greatness of those great guitar players. Because if you don't play something that's really interesting, then it kind of gets lost, and it's just adding that extra spice to these songs.
That's one of the things I always thought was cool. I mean, later, as I got older and I started, learning about recording and how records are made and modern recording techniques and stuff like that. One thing I always found interesting with those early Van Halen records is the guitars are never really doubled. So when he goes to a lead, the rhythm drops out. So it's up to the bass player to kind of fill it out and, do all that stuff. Not that Eddie needs any help filling anything out, but yeah, Michael Anthony.
Well, still, it's gotta make sense, right?
Absolutely.
We were talking about the production. I wasn't a big fan of the everything panned in one direction sort of thing, which they didn't really do that much on this song, thankfully. But I do like the thing that impressed me was how clean and clear everything sounded. Like everything sounded really good. You could hear everything really well. I mean, Ted Templeman obviously knew what he was doing, and I mentioned before, but we were at Warner Brothers for 3 years in the early 90s, and Ted Templeman had an office at Warner's. He was rarely in there, but he did have an office. But every once in a while, he was in there. And since we were kind of like the new rock kids on the block, I got to spend a little bit of time with him, just kind of picking his brain up some stuff. And he's a super smart guy. And, it was interesting hearing him relay some of the Van Halen stories. And I think a lot of it was just like, let these guys just loose and do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it sounds like. And Don Landy also had a huge part in sound.
Yep. We talked about him too, of course.
Yeah. Have you read the Ted Templeman book?
No, I haven't, and
I have it too. I haven't read it yet.
I'm real close. Yeah, I'm real close. I'm doing right now. I'm reading Bernie Taupin's book actually.
Oh,
which is really good.
Okay.
It's super fun. It's really good. He's an interesting character. And then I've got Alex Van Halen's book, which I'm going to read next.
Yes.
And then after Alex, I'm going to get to the Ted Templeman, because I like to do that sometimes, if read a couple books that are related to get different stories from different people. So that's my reading schedule for the next couple of months. So I'm excited to read that stuff though.
Yeah, I heard the Ted Templeman book is phenomenal. I haven't started it yet, but I will. That's on deck for me too.
Yeah, I have it. And, I've talked enough about. We talked about the riffs and everything, but it's in my head now because I've been listening to it so much the last few days. But just the ending of the song where they go, hey, that riff is just so unbelievably heavy. I remember when it first came out, it was like, whoa, this is so good. And even now, I listened to it the other day, that piece of that very ending, that whole riff, it's just angry and heavy. It's like, holy cow.
Yeah, it's magical. It really is. That whole record is unreal. There's so many moments like that though throughout the album.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one song, but I kind of wanted to go the heaviest route that I kind of could, because it goes with the podcast title and everything, and clearly Van Halen was a massive influence and certainly changed the landscape of how guitar players played and how metal was perceived. And they weren't obviously ever perceived a metal band; they were rock band, and I don't think any band really likes to ever get pigeonholed into that unless you're Sabbath or Priest. So I get it. But
I think Van Halen, I think the sound of the band kind of transcends all of that stuff anyway. It could be metal, it could be rock, it could be they have songs like Finish What You Started later on in their career that totally different.
Yeah, well, I think that's what makes them such a great band, and that's what you get so many different people, pop music people like them, and metal people, jazz people. I mean, you get people from all over the place, and that's ultimately what makes a really huge band, is when you've got people coming from all over the place to listen to what you do.
Absolutely, 100%.
I was going to ask you, so you're obviously a famous producer as well, and produced a lot of stuff. What was your take on the production, specifically on this song?
For me, this particular song, the guitar tone itself, I think, is extra juicy, which is a kind of a weird adjective to use for guitar, I guess, but that's what it sounds like to me. It's just really awesome and full. And, I read the stories, I heard the stories and what they use and how they got that sound. And it all sounds so very simple. So basically what I get out of it is the sound is in his hands. It's in his fingers. And I think that's the case with a lot of great guitar players. I think, if anyone else played through his rig, and, we've heard stories like that too. People have played through his rig over the years and it never sounded like Eddie. It can't, because the tone is in his hands. For this particular song, I think the guitar tone itself is what really grabs me. And the chord structure, the chords are very simple. It's just the way he's playing the riff is so unique and inventive. It's amazing.
Yeah, you make an interesting point about like people playing through his gear and it just doesn't sound the same. And there's a few guitar players that are like that. I mean, obviously Iommi, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Could play his rig and he can't do it. The other guy that I think of when I hear that is Ace Frehley. Because Ace had a really unique style of playing, and I've heard a million different people try to play his stuff, or Kiss solo bands or Kiss whatever. Nobody can recreate the way he plays those songs, or really even the sound of it.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah, Ace was great. There's definitely a magic in his playing as well. There always was.
Yeah, we haven't got to Kiss yet, but we're gonna get there. Don't worry. They were a massive influence on me. My favorite band when I was like 14 years old. So let me ask you. I want to ask you something because this just came up the other day. We did a episode on System of a Down, Hypnotize, and the guy who engineered it is a good friend of mine, Dave Schiffman, who's done everything from Audio Slave to Chili Peppers. He did 6 Feet Under for us, and which was fun. But he mentioned that when they were making those two Hypnotize and Mesmerize albums, that Darren liked to go into Guitar Center and he liked the way the guitars sounded in there because of the other guitars like on the wall. And so what they did when they recorded the guitars in the studio, they bought a whole bunch of acoustic guitars and set them all up there, and you can kind of hear them hum a little bit with the tones. So it's like just in there a little bit. I've never heard that before.
I mean, that's interesting. I'm trying to make sense of that in my head right now.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just if you have acoustic guitars lying around, it's going to resonate depending on, obviously how loud your amp is or whatever. But same with the snare drum. If you have a snare drum in the room and the snares are on, every time you hit a chord, you're going to hear the snare ringing in the background. That's kind of just that's how it is. But yeah, I guess using that as part of the tone, I don't really know. I mean, I guess you would have to, I guess, tune the guitars a certain way if they're going to ring like that on the wall.
Yeah, I had never heard that before. And when he mentioned it, I was like, oh, I gotta ask my producer friends about that, because I've never heard anything like that. It's an interesting concept, though.
It is interesting, yeah, definitely. So that was just a conversation you had with him?
Yeah, we did a System of a Down Hypnotize song, and he came on since he was the engineer. We talked about the production because it's part of what we do in these podcasts. So it was really interesting to talk to him about that. But anyway, so you have to told me here, just because you produced that great Jim Brewer record, Songs from the Garage. You guys go check it out on wherever you listen to music. It's really good. Brian Johns from AC/DC sang on a song on there. So give me one really good Jim Brewer story.
Oh my God. There's so many stories. He was, I mean, as you know, he's such a character. He's almost hard to work with because I can't even look at him without laughing. He just has this thing about him that makes you want to laugh. But I love him dearly. He's such a great guy, super talented too. Like, definitely one of the funniest people out there, I think, in my opinion.
Agree.
So, we flew down to Florida, Clearwater, Florida. I found a great studio down there, set it all up for Brian. We got there early. I did tons of research on the recording of like Back in Black, how they got Brian's vocal sound and the whole thing. And I did the best I could with the gear we had and put a vocal chain together that I thought sounded killer. We fired up the song. I had Jim go out there and do his Brian Johnson impersonation, and it sounded awesome. It sounded phenomenal. I was super stoked. I couldn't wait for Brian to show up. So a little while later, Brian shows up, and he's basically just in the control room. Like, he's also one of the funniest people I've ever met. He's like a pirate comedian. Between the two of them, I was like literally dying. It was insane. So he just was telling jokes for like an hour in the control room before we did anything. And then finally, it was time for us to do the vocals. I said, Brian, I got this awesome setup out there. The headphones are ready to go. The mic is ready to go. It sounds killer. Just whenever you're ready, just go out there and we'll get rocking. And I'm not going to try to do his voice because I can't. But he basically was like, I'm not. He's like, I'm not going out there. You give me a mic, and I'm gonna hang in here with the boys, with the lads. He's like, I want to hang out in the control room with the lads. I'm like, what? Really? So I basically had a heart attack because it's like I knew I had this amazing thing going on out there. The vocal sound was so good, and now he wants to do like a 58, and he wants to hang out in the control room and with the speakers really loud, and it's gonna sound crazy, and that's obviously not the ideal. For me, it's not the ideal way to do it, but that's what he wanted to do. So we did it, and ended up giving him a Shure SM7, and he banged out the vocals literally in like 20 minutes, like unbelievable, like super pro, super professional, so easy. I wish everyone was like that. And so he banged his vocals out in like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then he invited us all over to his house, and he cooked us steaks. So that was, like, to me, one of the best days ever in my life. Definitely one of the best experiences as a musician.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was an honor to have Brian Johnson be on a Metal Blade album, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, if you guys should check that out, it's a really fun album, and Brian's parts are amazing, and now you know the inside track. So, anyway, anything coming up, Rob? You want to share? You want to promote anything?
I'm cooking up a bunch of stuff. I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of recording, a lot of producing. Can't really talk about anything yet, but stuff is happening. So yeah, stay tuned.
Okay, put Rob Caggiano in your calendar to check for in about a month and a half, and you'll find some more good stuff. Well, dude, it's great to see you, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Great to see you too, man. Thanks for having me.
And that'll do it. Huge thanks to Rob Caggiano, Mark Lewis, Martin Popoff, Lizzie Borden for our great intro theme song, and producer Christian Blatt, who keeps this ship running. And we'll see you guys next episode.
Hey, hey, hey.